All right. Well, good morning slash afternoon, depending on where you're coming to us from or where we're coming to you and where we're meeting you at. I'm Clint Skutchan, T360. I run our organized real estate division, oversee all of our research and advisement capacity for associations and MLSs around the country. And I'm pleased to be joined today by our president and CEO, Jack Miller. And we're going to be leaning into the brokerage capacities included in the trends report for 2026. And there's nobody better to talk about that than Jack, in that he's been intimately involved in the development of the trends report. But in addition to that, does tons of research work, outreach to brokerages and franchisors and agents across the country. So he really has that connectivity piece between what the trends report means for us as a company and as advisors, but then linking that back into your day-to-day capacities, and in particular today as brokers. And I want to start, Jack, before we jump in, with just a thank you to our insider clients who are helping us to push this out today. This is a T3 insider client benefit where those who we work with in an ongoing capacity are able to not only share and take advantage of the knowledge and the information we provide them directly, but also to turn that and share it back out to their members, subscribers, technology providers, their clients. And so thanks to them for giving us this opportunity to get in front of that audience and be really intentional about what we're doing. And I know, Jack, insider programming for us is really important. Those ongoing relationships mean so much to us as an advisory group.
Yeah, the relationships we have with our insiders allow us to really focus on what we do best, which is the research and advisory capacity. And anybody watching this, just realize you're part of an organization that is supporting a broader research capability for the industry, and it's what enables us to provide some of the content that shows up in our trends report, but also in a lot of other areas that impact many organizations in the residential industry. So thank you for being part of that. And thanks to the leadership of your organization for participating with us.
Yeah, I think they truly help us to be better advisors because, I'm now 8 years removed from being an executive. And if you're not in that day-to-day capacity, I think from an advisor standpoint, it's really easy to lose touch with the day-to-day, necessities, the requirements, and just to live at that strategic level exclusivity. And so our ongoing relationships with insider clients, I think it's a reciprocity-based relationship where they're taking and giving and going back and forth. And so I think it really makes us as a company better positioned to help the industry as a whole.
Yeah, I totally agree. You never want to lose track with the people that are in the trenches at the rock face, really doing the work. And so again, thanks to all of our insiders for supporting our work and some of what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. Thank your leaders there. They're the ones that have helped us to do this. Jack, I want to, before we dive into the trends report, I think I want to talk a little bit about industry sentiment. And again, this goes back to the work that we are doing. It's a weird time out there right now. And I know in organized real estate space, there's a lot of onboarding of the frustrations, the difficulty of these contracting marketplaces, normalizing marketplaces. And so to me, going into 2026, there's a little bit of a heavier cloud that's hanging over it, and it's influencing kind of decision making. And so for me, when I started looking at this trends report, it is an opportunity to kind of start to scrub the slate a little bit and to really think forward and get re-energized, a lot like our opportunity report last year, where, look, we know we have a lot of challenges, but how do we reorient that and get it to where it can help us get into a better, positive, forward-thinking, proactive mindset? Because I think that's important as a part of this tool's capacity.
Yeah. So for context, I'll be entering my 25th year in the industry next year. So that's a long time in any one industry. And Stefan Swanepoel, who is our founder, has been in the industry more than 45 years and it has written more books about the industry than anybody else. He and my conversation about where we are right now is this is an unprecedented time of change for our industry, right? We are not only, it's not just the market conditions, which are, exceptional by any measure. It is also the background of brokerage change. It is the background of organized real estate and MLS change. It is the background of technology change, and that all of those things are happening in the same period of time. So it is right now, anybody listening to watching this and participating in the market, you are in one of the most dynamic real estate industry periods in living memory of people in this industry. And that is not an exaggeration. It is a fact. We've changed rules. We're moving, big companies are becoming enormous companies. A life-changing, industry-changing technology like AI showing up in the last 2 or 3 years. So this is a big time. It is not an understatement. And I would say our trends report this year really reflects that. I tell people every year, hey, you should get the report. It's important. It helps you look ahead. It helps you do stuff like that. It's a little bit of an eat your vegetables conversation about, like, you need to educate yourself about what's happening in the broader industry and get a 40,000 foot perspective. This report's really important because of what's going on right now. Like, if you're leading anything in this industry, a brokerage, a sales team, an MLS, or whatever, you've got to really get your bearings, because we are in a very, very dynamic time, and I think this report delivers on that in a number of different ways. We'll be backing up with facts and stats, and I'm going to share some of those on today's Zoom. So
yeah, that acceleration piece that was one of our primary trends from a few years ago. I think now that I'm thinking this through, I really want to go back and read that trend, because it was talking about how all the investments, the consolidation, the amount of money, but then the technology. And I think we've really started to understand the pace that AI has brought to us for that acceleration that we were talking about at the kind of the start of the 2020s. And now here we are entering past the halfway point. I think I've got to go back and revisit that, because that acceleration factor, I think, is finally fully immersed itself into our industry in a way that we were talking about a few years ago.
Yeah, and Clint's referring to what we refer to as stage 10 of the real estate industry, change phases that have gone on since the 1950s. The prior stage was big capital, was a lot of big capital coming into the industry. We definitely saw billions of dollars of capital come to the industry. And then what we're in the age of acceleration right now. And again, that's coming through in the report. That's coming through if you go to Real Estate News every day and you read what's happening there. Like, we are having every week, it seems like, industry groundbreaking events reported, or mergers happening, or significant changes in our industry. And that's what acceleration feels like. It feels like a whole lot of things coming at you all at once. And I think so I think it's correct. We're firmly in that stage 10 that will end up with we're going to be in a very different industry in 2 to 3 years. I mean, just as we power through this cycle, that's what's going to happen.
Well, speaking of shifts, there's been a bit of shift, and I want to talk this through, as people will, especially those who have been longtime readers of the Trends Report, there's a little bit of a shift in how we've assembled this year's report. And what I've really liked about just my initial look at it is that while there's fewer quote unquote chapters, the depth and the breadth of the chapters that are included still retain that broader kind of big capacity. And what I thought really came through was that stitching together of how this impacts brokerage and agents, and for my audience, associations and MLSs, that those were blended in, especially in, we'll talk specific chapters in a moment, but the idea of the industry in flux. Can you talk a little bit about the thought process that went into, and the delivery that's a little different for those that are longtime Trends readers?
For sure, yeah. So this report is the 21st edition of the Trends Report. The reports were started in 2005, and so we've been writing them for a long time. The typical Trends Report that people have been reading for the last 20 years has been about 10 trends every year, and that's been that's been on purpose. There've been a lot of different things going on. What we've seen happen over the last 4 or 5 years is a lot of these trends are collapsing into each other, right? And so they're actually forming what we're considering like mega trends in the industry. And so this year, instead of writing about 10 different trends, we said, really, there's 5 of these major trends in the industry that we're going to write about. And one of them has some kind of subheadings as you look at different parts of the industry. But we decided to pull it into 5 and really go deep on those 5 and give the reader a lot more data-based context on what's happening, so that you can sort out the signal from the noise, so to speak, in with some real data. And that's one of the things I love. This year's edition has a lot more like high value, in my mind, high value charts and graphs that really illustrate the point of what's happening with any particular trend. So that's what we did this year. It's still almost the same length. It's about 175 pages in total. I think we typically have been around 175 to 225 pages. So it's still a thick read, but I'll tell you, with the 5 trends, I find it a lot more digestible. So those of you that have been reading it for a long time, let me know what you think. But we decided to go deep and really look at impacts of each of those trends in a way that I think is very compelling as a reader.
And the through lines are there. Well, let's jump in. I know folks are wanting to know what's in there, right? Like we're just a couple days away from the electronic release of this, so we're actually giving you all, again, as insider members, subscribers, and clients, this kind of first blush at this. But these are big through lines as you talk about brokerage consolidation and competition, the industry itself being in flux, the national brokerage platforms that are arising, the overall integrated real estate experience, and the consumer's capacity and expectations against what we're seeing in the industry. And then the big top line one that's really important to me and central to our multiple listing services, but really important, I think, for the brokerage community right now too, is that comprehensive marketplace. So those are kind of the roll-ups of those 5 trends. Jack, I want to jump into the first one, which is become very pronounced here in the last quarter of 2025, which is that consolidation. And I think, many of us have been around this conversation for a long time and, your consolidation, it's another same thing. But I think when we left those practice changes, there was a lot of talk about how that would force more of the consolidation activities and kind of eat away at what the middle brokerage capacity looks like. I don't think any one of us had the expanded understanding of what eating away at the middle meant until we've seen some of these large merger activities over the last few weeks and months and years. And so, what for you, what structure or strategic advantages do you believe large scale firms now will hold in the next few years? And for those that aren't in that environment and are really trying to come up with their own competitive understanding of this landscape, what are the independents, those boutiques, where do they have still room to fit in and win? And how does that all stand up against this chapter?
Yeah, I think it's an incredible topic. By the way, this chapter I think the whole Trends Report's a must read, but if you're running a brokerage, this consolidation chapter is a must. Like you got to dive into it and understand it, because it will impact your market positioning and kind of how you think about your company and how you talk to your agents. So we've just seen unprecedented consolidation merger activity be announced this year at the scale that, when Stefan and I have talked about it, it's sort of like what happened in the airline industry when very large airlines started consolidating regional companies. And so we've effectively, with this Compass Anywhere merger, we've effectively created an American Airlines. Well, you could bet there's going to be a United, there's going to be a Delta, there's going to be a Southwest that will be built, because a lot of these companies, in order to compete, feel, and probably rightly so, they need to be bigger in order to compete with market share and technology and services and things like that. So when you look at it and say, well, what does this mean for the average broker? What does this mean for the agent practitioner? So what it means is that these companies are going to have scale that the industry's not seen before, which equals purchasing power, which, if managed properly, can equal a lot of efficiency. If you look at the national brokerage platforms, which is another chapter that is in this Trends Report, that's one of the things we're seeing, is that as these companies have gotten big, they have opportunities to get efficient in ways that are just not accessible to a single market local broker, right? And so what that means is we all need to get efficient and to hone our value propositions. So part of what we've been writing about for a long time is that as the industry consolidates, if your value proposition is not clear, if the audience you serve if you're not tailored to the audience you serve really well, and you're just kind of caught in the mushy middle, you're probably in trouble, because the players in the middle, where you don't have a clear value proposition, maybe you're not that efficient, you're going to be competing with people that are bigger, potentially more efficient, and have more purchasing power than you for tech and services. And you're also going to be competing with niche players that are really good at what they do in their specific segment. So my consultative advice, which we've provided to a lot of brokers, is know who you are and be the absolute best at it in your market. If you're going to be a big company, be big. Like, do the things you need to do. Be big, be efficient, be able to do M&A, be able to provide services at scale, be able to handle technology well. If you're going to be niche, absolutely own your segment, whatever that is, whether that's a luxury segment, whether that's like we specialize in riverfront or whatever it is, just own it, because that is the way to be the most secure right now. If you're kind of a little bit of everything, you're kind of big, but you're also do a bunch of different things, it's going to be hard to compete, because you've got people that are really going to be working there to be excellent in their segment. So that's, and I do think for the big guys, watch out. Purchasing power, the ability to leverage technology at scale, the ability to leverage data at scale, the ability to leverage the global workforce. A lot of the larger companies, that's part of what they're centrally putting all their transaction managers from an entire country, all the United States, into one room effectively, and training them on one set of software, so they're super hyper efficient. They're going to be more efficient than the transaction coordinator you hire in a local market. So that's a little bit of perspective.
I know you said not to be the mushy middle and not have clarity, but you do need to, when you're thinking through your strategies, be able to transpose those. If you are more culturally oriented niche,
For
you
sure.
still need to then in your strategies understand that there's an importance to the efficiency, the scale, even at your own level, and then vice versa. I mean, as the larger you get, the harder it is to stay connected to community and that cultural aspect. And so, brand retention becomes something that I think we'll see more of with the larger piece, because there's still that connectivity into the communities. But how do you then, for you, Jack, look at each of those things that again, maybe shouldn't be your core, but need to be a part of your strategy if you're transposing those?
So we always look at what is a broker, what does an agent do really well that makes them exceptional? What are the unique talents that exist within an organization, or unique capabilities and knowledge? And I'd say that's where you need to go, is like leverage that as much as possible, because that's how, and to the degree that you can scale it as much as possible. Create a more deep onboarding for your people, really get them enculturated in what it is that you do and the capabilities that you have to offer that are different. Those are the things that are difficult. Big companies are not the answer to everything, and not everybody's going to go to a big company, right? They do have some competitive advantages. You just need your own. That's the whole point of this, is like, you have to develop your own competitive advantage. If you don't have size and scale and purchasing power and comp plans that give a lot back to the agents, then you need value, and you need specific value that helps agents make money if you're a broker, or if you're an agent that helps you serve a client really, really well and better than anybody else in your segment, right? So that's the approach, is you have your own competitive advantage and focus on your strengths. I always say, take your strengths and go deep with them. Win big. That's the way to do it.
So all these things are, the report itself is so well stitched together. And so this one that we were just talking about, the consolidation, the competitive landscape, I think, lends itself so nicely into this next chapter, which is really about the industry flux and all the changes that are occurring right now. The traditional foundations of this industry are in flux, to be sure, from the things that are going on in my world, specific to NAR and what it means for association and MLS strategies. Obviously, the acclimation to these new ways of doing business in the brokerage and agent piece, like all these things really mean that we've got to be prepping our organizations, the agents, and now understanding that consumer capacity in terms of how we govern, how we regulate, how we put together our business models. So how does this uncertainty for you, Jack, impact the brokers? And maybe we can get a little tactical here in that, there's recruiting, there's compliance, there's day-to-day stuff that still has to occur in that brokerage environment against all these big industry shifts.
Yeah, for sure. So the trend for which we call the industry in flux kind of tracks a few different threads that, for brokers.
This is the part I loved most about this new approach, is that it had those threads, and it's a reminder like of how interconnected every aspect of what the residential real estate industry is about. I
want to touch on a few of the threads. So one of them is we looked at business models. So over the past 4 years actually now, I think we've been studying the 4 different business models for brokers in the industry, which and we did a deep dive on it and looked at the top 100 brokers in the industry, and then did some demographics to track, what of the 4 business models, how much of the top 100 live in those business models. And the business models roughly are traditional graduated split models, capped models where you have some sort of cap and then you usually just pay a transaction fee, pure fee-based models where you pay some kind of either a desk fee, an annual fee, a transaction fee, a membership fee, like it's really fee-based. And then what we refer to as a business generation model, where your company generates a lot of business that the agents that work. You think about Redfin or large sales teams or Team Ridges, or even companies like Redfin is a good example. Jason Mitchell Group is a good example of that business generation model. So we've been tracking those, and this chapter covers that, about what's happening in those models, like where we're seeing demographic shift and change, and how we're seeing, there are more capped companies today than there were 5 years ago. There's more fee-based companies than there were 5 years ago. There's even more business generation companies. And the traditional model is the one that we see less of demographically in that top 100. However, we also did an analysis on which models are most profitable for brokers and which models are actually where do agents make more money. And so that's where I'm saying, like, pick this copy up and go read that, because wherever you are, you need to be able to speak to whatever model you use. You need to be able to speak to the advantages of your model, and it's fit for certain kinds of agents. And one of the interesting findings from this chapter was we found that the traditional model both is more profitable for brokers, and also agents make more money based on our study of the top 100 companies. Agents end up making more money. And you go, well, how is that possible? Brokers are if the split and they're keeping more money and they're more profitable, how is it possible that the agents are making more money? And the answer is that the traditional brokerage companies tend to sell higher price point properties. And you'll find that's very prevalent in the luxury model. We see most of those are traditional, with very few flat fee companies that are in luxury. So you're seeing that higher dollar price points tend to be going to traditional model type companies, which is interesting. And when you look at what the agent actually takes home, it's more money. They may be giving more to the broker, but they're just making more money because the properties are selling are higher value. So again, important to dive in on this because it's really tracking that transition that we're seeing as we've introduced in the last decade more business models into the industry and business models at scale that have then climbed into that top 100 and are really, taking up a greater shelf space of the options in real estate. So super important to read that one as part of that. I think also tracking what's happening with artificial intelligence, and we did a great AI workshop just about a few weeks ago here in Austin, Texas. We brought in an expert. He spoke at our real estate leadership conference, the T3 Leadership Summit, back in May, and he brought a full day workshop for us about how to implement AI, how to think about it strategically, and then how to go do it in the business. And so this chapter includes, hey, here's where we are in this story of AI, and here's where you need to be focused right now. And then here's what's coming next. So it's another, like, if you're unsure of artificial intelligence in your business, this is like, imagine it's 1998, right? And somebody's like, hey, we should put our real estate company maybe on the internet and, maybe market our listings there. That's where we are with AI right now. That's right where we're right there, where people are like starting to pop their heads up and go, maybe I should be using this like more than just to answer questions like a better Google. Maybe I should be figuring out how to plug it in. And this chapter covers like, here's the strategy, here's the approach, here's where we're on the story, here's some of the things that you can do with it right now that are important. And then we have some great bonus material we're going to be sharing with that came out of that workshop with Trends Report subscribers as well, that we think are going to add extra oomph to that. Like, hey, this is specific stuff that your peers are doing with artificial intelligence. So those are a couple of the threads out of that chapter that I think that as a leader, as a broker, or as an agent, right now, an agent, you are a company of one, but you can be a company of many through hiring AI tools to do your business, right? That's part of the cool thing about artificial intelligence is I can now hire an agentic AI to like take over certain parts of my business for me and to do them. And we talk about that approach and how that's going to become more and more and more. Everybody's going to be doing that to handle transactions and marketing and customer response and your database management and your scheduling. And those are all specific areas where artificial intelligence is going to play a big role. And we're all going to need a strategy for it, down to the person, like down to like, how am I using it every day? I'm thinking about it constantly. So that's those are some of what's in that chapter. There's a little bit on NAR. There's a little bit on what's happening in legal. Again, ones where we felt like it's important that we touch on these because they're all evolving. NAR is undergoing some big change. There's still some legal cases out there. There's still some pending stuff that's happening, which means everybody's got to have their hatches battened down, right? You got to make sure everything is I's are dotted, T's are crossed. Compliance is super important right now. Getting people on really solid contracts, super important right now at whatever level and in whatever situation you find yourself in. There's still more of these attorneys that are circling our industry. They've seen that there's money here and they're going to try to figure out how to take it, right? So this chapter gives you those updates on what the cases are, what the issues are, what to watch out for, and then you can apply those into your business in a way that makes sense for your locality. So it's high level, and I know a lot.
Yeah, well, the one that I think everybody is, and rightfully so, really intentional about right now, or should be being intentional about, is that AI aspect. And you mentioned that, we're kind of fumbling around with this as if it were the internet. What I will say about that, the exponential speed, growth, and change of the internet, or even social media for that matter, where some were like, oh, I'll just wait, I'll catch up to that in a few months. Like this, I think this next 9 months, if you're not in there and having clarity about what your strategy is, your vision for AI is, Like, this is not a, oh, we'll catch up later moment. This is a, get on the front side of the wave, or you'll be swimming up the backside for a long period of time. So for me, it's really getting clear about having that strategy that starts with your vision, and also really spending a lot of time understanding about investing in development of for yourself, or finding those who are out there that are really doing good in these platform arenas. Because as you start to look at like the scaling of this AI piece, there's real cost to it. And I know I'm doing a lot of research and listening to a lot of people outside of industry about how, as a leader of an organization, are you approaching AI and integrating it and ensuring that you have clarity about what the purpose of use is versus just plugging into the next shiny object. And there are going to be millions of shiny objects where we used to see hundreds.
Yeah, this is not a small thing. I've been telling people, and I'm doing it myself, like, every week you should be doing some experimenting with AI in your business. Like, and to the degree that you can create something valuable, it's actually it's not hard to create something valuable that you can use with artificial intelligence tools. Even just, you don't have to go talk to a vendor. You don't have to do a bunch of stuff like that. You can just use some of the off-the-shelf tools and create real value for your team. We just put all of our research into Notebook LLM with Google, and now I can query our entire body of work, all the research we've ever done, and get answers out of that body of work very easily. And that's like your policies and procedures, all your coaching, all your training, all the materials you've got. Like, start collecting those things together and feeding them through AI so that you can begin to leverage yourself and create a digital duplicate of your knowledge base at your company, or even your knowledge base for yourself as an agent. Put all your client information, all your transactions. I mean, there's a lot to be done there that can create value for you. So everything Clint said and more. Let's go.
Yeah. And again, that acceleration chapter just sits in my head when I hear this again. That acceleration is real, and if you're not running now to try and catch up, it is going to be very, very difficult. This next one, the third chapter here, third trend, if you will, leans into this capacity, right? So it talks about the idea of a national brokerage platform model, and specifically here, there's a deep dive, into some that are really leveraging this today to grow exponentially, to not just roll out technology or be platform oriented, but really integrating their business model, their strategies, and those aspects. So, how do you think in terms of, technology, data, training, all those investments? How do you think as a broker to make this function at that more scalable platform business level? Again, this goes back into what we were talking about earlier as well. What does that look like, Jack, to really get more specific?
Yeah. And to give a little bit of context, the big change that's happened in our industry in the last 20 years, one of the big changes you can witness is how many of the top 20 brokerage companies are new companies that were built after the year 2000, and then how many of the high growth companies are built on a single platform that provides services and value to the agent. And we're talking about EXP, Real Brokerage, LPT Aperture, now Epic Realty. Like, these are companies that are looking at their brokerage as a platform that provides services and marketing and capabilities to their agents. And so that's kind of the fundamental thinking. This isn't about, oh, I need a CRM tool, oh, I need a website tool, or oh, I need this. It's not about that now. It's really about, how does the platform enable my agents to do their business, right? And how can I create unique capabilities with my platform? And so it's really brokers thinking as platform type businesses that are, in the cases, the ones I mentioned, national at scale, right? And it's never been easier to do this. Like, we now have tools and capabilities where you can say, I'm going to build something where if I want to do business in one market or 20 markets, it's really the same. It's almost the same work, other than signing MLS agreements and making sure you have access to the data. It's basically the same work to build a national company today as it is to build a local brokerage. So think like a national, think like a big boy, and think about how you can extend your capabilities in ways that some of these larger companies. That's what I would say. Like, we're not all going to go out and build an EXP or build, a Redfin or build something like that. That's not how entrepreneurs work. You solve the problems that are in front of you, but learn from the people that went and did that. Say, oh, well, they really looked at this as a platform type problem, and how do I create value with the platform, including all aspects, not just like tools for agents. It's like the training, the onboarding experience, the data environment, the unique, capabilities, which, by the way, artificial intelligence can support really well. The unique data that they pull in to create that value. Every broker on here, even every agent on here, you've got unique data that you could put into a platform for yourself and then for others, where other people could. I think about when I ran a brokerage here in Austin, Texas, and this was way before we had any of these tools, and we started doing some of this. So we're like, hey, we have a lot of in-house knowledge about neighborhoods, so we started collecting that in-house knowledge about neighborhoods and put it into a database, and we're able to use it competitively because we had that data. We did the same thing. All the condos that were in Austin, Texas, we started collecting that data together, putting it together. There was non-MLS data that we collected and created. And I think that strategy is now easier to do today, more accessible to do today, and can create new competitive advantages for you in your business. So think like these national platform players, but do it in your own market, in your own way to serve the clients that you're going after. Now's the time to think big. You have the unprecedented access to tools in history. Like, we are the most powerful people that have ever existed. There are kings that ran whole countries that do not have the power that you and I, Clint, have at our laptops in front of us to do stuff, right? So use it, like really use it. And the national platform players, they've got that message, they're running with it. But there's no reason everybody on this call could not just go do it for themselves and say, I'm really gonna think about this business as a platform for me, and then for others, and then for many others, right? So, and that's how you can change your whole entire trajectory. Completely changes when you think that way.
I like what you said, though, Jack. This is pulling just a little bit of a thread that we didn't even discuss coming into this, but you mentioned the collective wisdom and capabilities of the agents within whatever size brokerage you have. That's a platform too, like that collective expertise, the niche capacities that you have within the totality of your platform. So to me, that's that opportunity to be gathering and leaning into your agents, and agents for you to become a contributor to that overall brokerage-based platform. It is the intelligence, it's the analysis, it's the uniqueness that builds on the basic data that then for me gives them that platform capacity, right?
100%. So I called when the AI revolution started happening, I called a very well-known coach in the industry, and I said to him, how many hours of coaching do you have recorded? And he responded, he said, probably 150, maybe 200,000 hours. And I was like, what would happen if you took all that coaching and you fed it into an AI and you created like a super coach? Because it's got all these coaches' experiences from all these different clients and all these different situations. So it's that kind of thinking where it's like, look, anybody listening, do you have recordings of trainings that you've done with agents? Maybe stuff you did during COVID? Do you have recordings or materials that you created about like specific neighborhoods or areas? Like, okay, well, you've got some assets in artificial intelligence and some of these scaling techniques used by these national brokerage platforms. Those are the ways that you can create real enterprise value in your business, and just go for it. And if you don't, start hitting record. Go for a walk and say, I'm going to start recording my knowledge. Start getting with your agents, record their knowledge. Say, tell me everything you know about this. You've been selling it. There's a lot of agents that are at the end of their career. They're not going to do a bunch more transactions, but boy, they'd love to tell you everything about every neighborhood in town and the developer and the trees and the things that they've seen and all the things they've learned. Like, start hitting record and all that stuff, because you can create enterprise value out of that by feeding it into an AI, feeding it into your data platforms. And now, I'm talking to people who are almost entirely replacing the broker in charge function with an AI that's had a lot of data fed into it. And there's always a human factor ultimately in weird situations, but probably 95% of agent questions to brokers have been asked and answered before, right? They're not special. And if you have that in an AI, you can get it, especially tied to local issues, tied to form changes, tied to all the stuff that just happened the last year. I mean, so much value that you can create as a broker right now, or as a team leader, or as even for yourself. So anyway, you can hear me. I'm on my.
Yeah, no, but I want to finish with one question here related to this, but I think it also leads into this integrated consumer real estate experience piece. Is like going back to this, the idea of a platform brokerage, and it being more than just a traditional brand with better tech. So it's not just a tech bolt on. And I just want to clarify that, because I think that leans into then the consumer experience that is not about just a bolt on. It's about truly experiential, and to have experiential, you need everything to be built into that platform. So can you just, as we move into this next one, what's the clarity there about that?
Beautiful segue over into the next trend. So the next trend, and we've been writing about this one for a while, about the integrated transaction, and lots of industry leaders have talked about this. Like, how do we create an easier transaction where everybody, mortgage, title, the broker, the agent on the other side of the transaction, like everybody has access and everybody's able to see what's going on, and we can make it easier to manage, easier to understand where people are in the process, where people get timely updates and information. And we just take this process and make it less labor intensive. And that's happening right now. You look kind of the capstone of like that thesis is, okay, well, Rocket Mortgage buys Redfin. Why? Well, because Rocket now owns the nation's largest mortgage servicer, Mr. Cooper. So they have millions of consumers that already, pay them a mortgage. They have purchase mortgage in Rocket Mortgage. And now they have Redfin, which is top of funnel, people going and looking for properties that are early in their process and they want to connect with an agent and find something to buy. So they're building that integrated experience. By the way, this is not a new concept. I mean, the Hannahs have been doing it. Home services have been doing it, where it's like, okay, we're really a consumer-facing industry that has a lot of us that don't realize that. We're just like serve one consumer at a time, but it's consumer-facing as a whole in all these different avenues. And that's the perspective. This chapter talks about that perspective on what is the consumer's experience through the entire transaction with you, with your company. And then what are the large players doing to build that consumer experience? Zillow is building that experience. Compass is building that experience. And there's tools, by the way, even if you're an independent broker, there's tools you could be using to build that experience that are like, okay, full life cycle marketing to the client, taking them from, renting to owning, to investing, to selling, to the entire life cycle of real estate. We know everybody in this country goes through in one form or another. They're somewhere in that cycle, and having a platform approach to that, like how do you show up to the consumer and what, how do you engage with them? And then on a business side, your business approach, joint ventures, ownership of title companies, the ability to have title in a box, which by the way is, some of the large title companies are rolling out next year to say, okay, I need a title company just for my brokerage. Great. There's ways you can do it now. So it's really that thinking from the consumer perspective. How do you create the entire ecosystem for your business? Either with yourself, through a network, through a franchise, through a partnership with a national company. There's a lot of different ways to get there. And this chapter kind of explores what those ways look like and kind of what the large companies are doing in this space. Again, super important, because that's where the consumer is. The consumer wants this. They want this to be easier. The whole time they've wanted this to be easier. We just haven't had the business infrastructure or the tools to really support it. And we do now. We do now. They're available even down to the individual broker level.
And you talked a little bit of that that implementation piece, the execution piece, but raising it up to that strategic level. Do you see this idea of that integrated consumer ecosystem, as you noted, as primarily a customer experience strategy? Is it a revenue diversification play? Where there are thin margins in brokerage, so it gives you that ancillary revenue, or is this really just a necessity to be competitive in the marketplace?
It's all of those things, Clint. It is all of those things. It is something where as you are looking at your business, you want to have scale. You want to have new business lines and new areas for revenue for your business. You want to have customer retention. In terms of some of these services or retention, like help you keep people in your ecosystem throughout their life cycle, right? And so that's why to do them. That's why the big companies are doing them. They're taking a very strategic look and saying, what does the consumer use in real estate over their lifespan? What are the things that they use, and how do we make sure that they can plug into our ecosystem in ways that are business productive for us, which will make us more money, diversify our revenue, get us other opportunities that we don't have today. And we've been teaching this for a long time at T360, our clients. We have a lot of clients that have started mortgage JVs, title companies, property management, have gotten into, they've said, look, we need to have a rental arm, because that's how we incubate people who are then become ready to buy. So we've worked with many companies that have done that. And this trend really speaks to that. And we're seeing it. It's at such a big level now that it's unavoidable. You can't look at what Rocket is doing, what Zillow is doing, what Anywhere is doing, what Compass is doing, what Home Services is doing, and not go to get to this conclusion of like, oh, okay, this is the game this is the game everybody that has the money and the experience and the knowledge to play. Maybe we should figure out how to play too. And I'd encourage that. And we do with our clients, is like figure out where, and you don't have to do all of it all at once, but Get educated. That's the first part. Get educated on it, and then decide where your easy points are engaged. And this chapter has some of those points in it that we think are good first steps for most brokers and agents.
Well, let's round out on the trends with trend one, and it's the one that's most, I've spent the most time on, contributed to, talked about. You and I actually did an Ask T3, kind of podcast on this, which is the comprehensive marketplace. And for those that want a deeper dive on this, go check out that version of our podcast on AskT3.com. But this comprehensive marketplace is kind of central, and it's the centrifuge for all of these things we've been talking about. And it's also probably the one that's a lot of people are most interested in from a brokerage capacity of what does my long-term strategy look like if we see an erosion of the comprehensive marketplace, in part due to the change of the compensation model no longer being embedded in the MLS, new marketing strategies that we're hearing a lot of debate about, transparency, equity, fairness versus market positioning, niche, exposure, all those pieces. Can you wrap this one up? I'll put a bow on this one, but you have to understand this, I think, really to execute against those other items.
This one's an interesting one because it really depends how people approach it or think about it. Often depends on where they sit, right? So if you're at a very large company that has 25% or 30% market share in a major market, then you're going to look at this and say, look, I've got a lot of listing market share, and I should get the rewards for that listing market share. I should be able to leverage that to recruit agents, to draw more consumers to my brand, to do all those kinds of things. And that's discussed in the chapter. And there's some obviously very notable companies. We interviewed them. They're in the chapter that talk about that strategy, right? If you are a smaller company and you do not have a controlling market share in your territory, then you may have different interests and say, look, I really think the interests are that we have a fair and transparent marketplace. That is, I don't have to send my buyers to 8 million different places to look for listings, and that I have value in servicing them, on the buy side and on the list side, in ways that are beneficial to both buyers and sellers. And I need to be maybe more collaborative with other brokers, and I need to have messaging that speaks to the value of the full marketplace, putting things through the MLS and marketing them broadly and early in the process, as opposed to through a closed, early marketing process, right? So it really depends. Your strategy is going to depend on where you sit, and it's going to depend on the advantages your company has, and also maybe the networks that you live within. If you're a franchisee inside of Anywhere, you may have a different perspective on this in 2 or 3 years than you have today. And you may approach this as like, hey, I like this pre-marketing process that Compass does, and I'm going to adopt it into our business because it gives us a competitive advantage. And the chapter really goes through that thinking about here's the span of options and opportunities that we see with this. Here's some of the risks. There's some real risks if a lot of our markets become private, where they're not shared via the MLS. We don't have that transparent marketplace. There will be some impacts that are hard to get back. Things like the ability to produce viable comps, the ability to advise your clients on sales and pricing. A lot of transactions essentially are private and off MLS. That's very dangerous. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that is a potential side effect. Also, not being able to see on market, like hey, it's not just what sold recently. What are the on market comps? I mean, that becomes very challenging in an environment where properties are not contributed into the MLS or they're not visible to other participants in the MLS. And it affects things like financing. Banks can't get good appraisals because some of the appraisal data is limited or doesn't contain recent entries, or there's other factors impacting the quality of that data. What do banks do in that situation? Well, they're taking on more risk, so they charge more money. That's how it works. So there's a set of trade-offs that I think are important for the industry to look at. There's also a set of trade-offs and strategies that brokers need to look at depending on where you sit. If you're a small company and you don't have dominant listing market share, you're going to need a different strategy than maybe a large company that maybe does take a lot of listings. And if you are a large company that takes a lot of listings, you need to ask yourself, is it better for my sellers to participate fully in the MLS? Is it better for them to have criteria around what gets held back and what gets contributed? There's real questions there that we bring up in the chapter, and some kind of helpful thinking around which strategy is right for individual brokers that are participating in their marketplaces.
I can assure you this conversation is the comprehensive marketplace, openness versus competitive advantages is really heavily being discussed by MLS leaders right now. I was just at a strategic session this week where it was like the focal point, because this is really important for the future of the MLS, the accuracy and data and some industry greater good capacity that could be stripped away by being able to bring together disparate sets of data through AI and other things. Again, the integrity of that data may be brought into question. So I'll be doing actually a deeper dive on this for those that want to do a double dip. Our insider clients are presenting more of an MLS and association oriented assessment of the trends report coming up tomorrow. So you can tune in for that one. For those that are joining us here live. I want to close out, Jack, with that forward look, the broker's role in the next decade. And as we talked about, the acceleration is real. If you fast forward 5 years, what do you believe the word brokerage will mean organizationally, economically, in this marketplace that's increasingly becoming nationalized, automated, data-centric, platform-oriented? What does brokerage mean in 5 years for you, Jack? And I know you don't always love prognostication, but I think you do enough work and you see enough of how things are changing today against where they're trying to go to be able to answer this for us.
Listen, I think good brokers are the thing that I find that is true with quality brokers that do good business and have sustained through lots of different kinds of markets. They're really learning based. They're savvy. They've got street level smarts and at least some eye on the strategy, on the bigger picture, right? So I think that all that's going to stay true. I think that's been true for the last 50 years. And if you talk to, and I have the great privilege of getting to talk to a lot of broker leaders in my role, and I find that's true. These are wicked smart people, and often they bring other tools. Often they're charismatic. Sometimes they're good speakers. Sometimes they're good trainers. They may have other things. So I think brokers will still bring all those to the table. What I think is different now is that we're going to need a brokerage demographic that is going to be willing to really look at this industry and rethink their business, right? And say, I'm going to think differently. I'm going to think up new things about how my business works in order to build and maintain competitiveness, because that's what is happening in this industry. Is people are looking at this industry and they are dramatically rethinking it at a high level. And with people that have a lot of money and have very smart people from maybe other industries that they pulled in to do that as well. And that's not just, there's a lot of hubris. Sometimes people come from outside the industry and think it's all going to change overnight. I think those of us that have been in it for a long time recognize it's a very durable industry. And by the way, the people that are in it are making a living in it, especially as brokers and leaders of things, have to be darn smart and resilient and willing to change. And now's the time where you lean into that because of the level of change. It's different. This is a fundamental set of changing factors in our industry between AI and the market itself and these consolidations and what that means is that it will challenge the best leadership we have to do even better than they've done in the past, and to bring up leaders around them that will help them think in certain areas. Some of you listening to this are like, man, I'm not going to figure this AI stuff out. That's just not where I am in my career or my life or whatever. Well, team up. You got to bring somebody on board that's going to do it for you in your business, right? You got to do that. If you're an agent, you're like, I'm not going to figure this out. Well, then to go find a broker that's going to figure it out for you. Which, by the way, there are brokers that are figuring this out and are willing to teach it, willing to provide those advantages. So this is an area where it's just realize there's all this change coming, and either you got to figure it out or you got to put together your team to figure it out and get the right people as part of that. And that's what I think is going to be different. I think in another 4 or 5 years, we will see brokerage teams that have the capabilities of, Fortune 1000 companies, because I think that's where we are now, where you need that kind of, you've had to be a lot more sophisticated as a broker over the last 2 decades than before, with all of the different changes that are coming. And I think that's going to become more and more true, and where you're going to need those kind of general business skills, those collective smarts, that management intelligence in order to be able to do it. It's why we built T360. We looking at the future, back in 2013 when Stefan and I decided to get in business together and build this company, we said, you know what, we think the future is going to be more complicated and interesting, and that companies are going to need a good partner for figuring things out and for thinking through change and for how to apply things like artificial intelligence or like new business models into their company. And that's why we built the business, is we saw that was coming. And now we're here. So that's what I think brokerage leaders look like in the future. I think they'll get help. They'll look for expertise. They'll build smarter teams. They'll get smarter themselves, and they'll adapt to these big changes in the industry. effectively, and they'll create new stuff. You're going to build things that don't exist in the industry. If you're here today and then you're here in 5 years, I promise you, you'll build something that didn't exist today. Right?
Jack, I'm more of a West Coast kid myself, so I would say hella smart, not wicked smart, but like we got hella smart people in this industry. And as you point out, if they're leveraging all the things that are coming our way over the next 5 years, they are going to be well positioned. But part of that is, again, looking and doing this landscape work. T3trends.com. You can go there. We'll get you the QR code, and you can just scan that to go and get your copy of this. Again, thanks to our insider clients that provided this to you all. And even through them, we can do some bulk purchasing that lowers your cost to access that trends report. Again, we offer that to them as insider clients first. So thanks to our insider clients for allowing us to spend some time with your brokers and agents who are in the audience. Again, our release is coming up November 12th. So this thing is going to be literally fresh, hot off the presses, or in this case, hot off the zeros and ones, the electronic version. The presses will come in December. So those are all coming from behind. Jack, thank you for sharing your time, your focus, your intentionality around the brokerage capacity to this. This year, again, like last year, I think is building really heavily towards that broker strategy. And if you spend time with this and you are thinking it through, this will advance, and ideally will get you more optimistic about that 2026 in front of us. Maybe you're down and you got agents who are. This should help you to think forward. So thanks for your time, Jack. Appreciate you.
You bet. It's great. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Take care.